it off there so it's not on your computer. Nat's here as well.
Hello.
Hello.
She's just eating at the moment. Okay, so I wanted to talk about gardening and indoor plant care because first and foremost, this is actually a pretty major part of house sitting, because you occasionally get to the odd house sit where there's literally no garden, no indoor plants, just maybe a cactus or an imitation plant.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times we do get to experience a whole range of different things. And, being, borderline 7 years of doing this now, we've actually had some really funny experiences and new experiences, things that we would never have had if we hadn't embarked on this journey. I just really wanted to share a few of those, but also hear from, people who do have an actual green thumb, which, I don't know that I could necessarily solo sit, because this is one element that I do like a little bit in the area of. Nat's sitting there saying
a little bit.
she looks after everything green. As I said in the email that I put out, I am very happy to mow lawns, whether it be with an electric mower, a gasoline mower, or a ride-on mower. I love mowing lawns. And I tend to be more of the hauler of the rubbish to wherever it needs to go. So Nat is sort of more of the expert in weeding. I don't know what my game is on that, but it's like I get paranoid that I'll pull weeds that look obvious, but the ones that I get unsure of, I'm like, oh, should I do that? Should I do that? And I think this came to head most when we did a house sit in upstate New York, which was just coming out of spring into summer. So everything that had sort of been dead through the winter started to come to life into the spring. And this particular house was only just purchased by the homeowners. And they said this actually was a prize-winning garden. Like, before we bought the house, the owners here had amazing gardens, whatever. And as everything started to come to life through that spring and into summer, I literally had no idea what was a plant and what was a weed and what I should look after and what should be pruned and what shouldn't be. And it was scary. So I was just more than happy to get on the ride-on lawnmower and do that. But then Nat started fighting me for that, because she liked to do
that's the most fun ever.
Ride-on lawnmowers are different. But when it comes to the indoor plants, succulent and not, me, cacti, any other sort of, aloe vera, agave, whatever, no problem. But delicate things, and then you get right through into can't wait to get a house sit with an orchid, and then you've got to do that whole special touching, like loving, caring, and it freaks the crap out of me. So I am happy to have Nat on hand for that. So I'd love to hear your own experiences of house sitting with indoor plants. And well, the other side of it for me as well is how much I've learned by having veggie gardens. Like I grew up in a family that never grew their own herbs or, even had chickens or plants or vegetables or anything. So it's sort of, it's been really enriching to be able to experience picking a tomato off a tree and eating it. And having that sort of aspect. So love to hear your stories. So let's open it up. What have you done, Doreen?
Well, actually, I'm thinking of our last one, which is sort of interesting. We just came from France 9 days ago, I think. And that one, she had quite the garden. And I said to her, because I love pulling weeds. I mean, not a lot.
Do you? What? Do you want to come on house sit with us?
Sure.
Sure. Anytime, as long as these big fat ones, they're so satisfying when you get all that stuff out of the ground. Those big ones, you just, there's a real visceral kind of an experience. But I said to her, can I pull the big weeds if I see a weed? And then she gave me this long lecture how at the back of the house they had something that started with a B, and they planted it and it was wild. So I went outside with her husband and I said, show me. And I think it was borax. And they had it planted and they wanted it to spread, but they didn't, but there were tons of weeds there as well. So he and I pulled weeds together. But then she showed us her pond, and her pond it had only been put in April. And it was an odd shape, and she had what would you call it? She had a shelf, and on the shelf she had potted plants around this pond, and some of them were going to be pulled out and taken inside for winter, but while we were there they were all going to stay in. But she had this green algae stuff that was growing in the pond, and she said, if you could just and she put her hand in really cold water and starts pulling this green stuff out, and it was like, it just really grossed me out. I was like, I'm supposed to do that? Excuse me. That was my response. I was like, but then we figured out a way to get, she had bamboo poles, and I talked to the gardener and I said, Mrs. So-and-so has requested that we clean the pond out. And he said, oh, there's bamboo poles behind the garage, get them. So John and I were out there literally swizzling this green stuff to clean the pond out, which is the most different gardening I have ever done.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
You ever, has
we
anyone
had a similar type of experience in France, and we had not just the sort of the algae weeds thing, but didn't we have frogs with that as well that we were trying
to yeah. Oh, we had a huge frog. There was lots of frogs in the pond, and they would get really pissed off when we would put the Twizzler in, the bamboo pole. The frogs would just leap across the other side, and they were this, I'm not exaggerating, they were almost a foot long. She had big frogs in there. Ooh.
Yeah.
That was the oddest gardening.
We actually, at the same sort of situation, we had a gardener. Actually, we had both a lawnmower and a gardener, and the gardener was this lovely English girl who was there to tend the roses, sort of more than anything, tend the roses and prune the different trees. But we had this massive long strip pond, I guess you'd call it, and I even forgot about that. The amount of times that we had to like get in there and get the algae stuff out, and it was crazy. And we had the frogs and all the other stuff going on. It was it was really quite insane. But the biggest thing about that particular property for us was the irrigation. They had major issues with because we went from it was kind of coming out of winter into spring and then into summer. We were there for quite a long time. And when we got to the summer period where we needed to use this irrigation, and the pond that the water was being drawn from was getting lower and lower, and we had to keep going, not miles, but definitely a long distance away to make sure that the irrigation was getting in to the pond to be able to get the water out. It was just a hilarious sort of gardening experience.
Not really. It wasn't that funny at all, actually. Middle of summer and you're trying to water probably about 2 acres of lawn with like hand watering just about in the end. It's just like a nightmare. I could not wait to get out of this property in the end.
Can I share one other quick experience? Another most interesting thing. I wish I had my phone here. As the homeowner left this 18th century mansion that actually belonged to my ancestors at one time in Scotland. And as he leaves, he says, the important thing is to take care of Fred. Fred is more important than the dogs. And he said, just joking. I was like, Fred. So Fred was the automatic lawnmower, and they had 6 acres of property, and about 3 acres was under immaculate grass that was actually, the lawn was dug down in the 18th century so you could enjoy the view. And so Fred was kind of important, and Fred would try to climb trees, and he's an automatic lawnmower. He's one of the robots, and he worked 17 hours a day.
Did you have to control him, or he was?
No, they have a wire around the perimeter, and he goes to the wire and then he comes back. We had to learn how to turn him on, how to turn him off in case because he was on default, but just in case. And we had to learn how to pick him up and turn him around if he tried to climb a tree. And he worked 17 hours a day from like 6 in the morning till, I don't know, 9 or 10 at night. And he did a brilliant job, and the lawn was always perfect. But we were there for 2 weeks, and he lasted about 11 days. And then we called up the manufacturers, and they had to send somebody out, and he needed to be rebooted. And so John got into all the technology about these robot lawnmowers and how expensive they are, and how you take care of them. And when they need a reboot with a new software installation, there's nothing you can do about it. But that was a really different gardening chore.
Well, I can't believe you're talking about this, because it was literally only weeks ago that I had my first introduction to a remote control automatic lawnmower. I didn't even know they existed. And we met up with 𝗣𝗲𝗿𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗧 Chamberlain, who's in the inner circle, and we went to what's it called? We went to Waterloo.
Oh, like, Waterloo.
We went to the
hill. We used them on the hill. We were there.
Yeah.
Right.
So when we were walking around to, we was with 𝗣𝗲𝗿𝗀𝗀, and we're walking around, and here's the guy out there with his remote control, and they do, because it's a really steep.
Yes, it's very steep.
Sort of the pyramid as such of this hill. And we're watching him use this remote control, and it's pretty cool. We're all excited about it. So we're all sort of like filming a piece that are performing for us and that. But she said, oh, my son will be so interested in this because he has a lawn mowing business back in the States. And I was just like, oh my God, like a remote control. But now you've taken it to a whole other level, that this thing was totally on autopilot. You weren't even like remote control.
Oh, no remote control. And they had a wire all around the grass, where the grass was that he would, and sometimes he'd be over here, sometimes he'd be over here, but he couldn't cross a path. So he would go kind of zigzag back and forth. And because they had formal gardens, they had a tennis court, they had, they had 6 or 7 acres. Yeah. And he was fascinating because he had a docking station. So when his power
got the robot vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, exactly. And so when his power got really low, he'd go chugging along to the docking station, and he'd backslide to the docking station, and then he's there for a few hours. And so all we had to do was get up and say, is the light on? And at night, when it got dark maybe 8:30, 9 at night, and he was still out there. You'd see the red light in the dark going back and forth. Quite interesting, and a new experience for us.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That's cool.
Well, I mean, what we're dealing with here in this property right now is
leaves.
Yeah, we've had the fall, but the garden or the whole entire yard doesn't get a lot of sun now because the sun's dropped so much heading into winter. And I thought about getting the lawnmower out to more than anything pick up the last of the leaves that I hadn't sort of raked and stuff. And it's just so soggy, I'm not going to be able to. But this particular house set is available again, which I put into the inner circle. And one of the members, a solar lady, sort of said, I could do, this time frame or whatever, but I'm not great at a gasoline lawnmower, like in doing the pull aspect. And the 81-year-old that we're house sitting for had even said to me, it's a bit hard to start. And we've had lawnmowers, like, gas lawnmowers, where they've been a nightmare to start. Yeah. This one is actually really easy, but they've got the backup plan of the electric lawnmower, which takes me to the experience that I had in Greece. We had this property. There's a whole other story with regards to it, but basically we had an electric lawnmower that, instead of having 4 wheels, only had 2 left on it.
Front wheels.
It was meant to have 4 wheels, but the other 2 had disappeared. So we would literally have to have this massive long extension cord and lifting it up to push it to try. It was just ridiculous. So then when you get to have an experience of like, you know, a ride-on lawnmower for big properties, or even having a massive big, you know, petrol lawnmower for a really small amount of space, which we had in Barbados one time. It was kind of ridiculous to even get it out. It would have been easier just to use the whippersnapper the whole time. But
or scissors, huh?
yeah, well, we've done scissors too.
We
had one little patch of grass in Mexico, and it was up on top of a paved area. And the reason that she had this patch of grass was just to kind of have like the dogs do an emergency run out the door, need to pee. But it was like a raised garden that they jump up into. So there's no way you could put a lawnmower in there. So we actually sat there. We've done a video on it. We sat there and cut with scissors the lawn on that one.
Oh, is he a Belgian Shepherd? What is he?
No, he's a flat coat retriever.
A very big one.
Oh, he's big. He's beautiful.
He is big and beautiful,
He's
but
very
he's
demanding.
very demanding. Yeah.
Hey, pig. No.
Yeah, we had a demanding dog when we were in Belgium. We get it.
So yeah, with regards to Nat going down to Paris for 8 nights, that left me in charge of the indoor plants, and I have to say I did get a little bit freaked out about that because we're now in quite a humid time as well. So me trying to judge how much I should or shouldn't water and all of that. So
yeah, it's been a bit like that. Even I felt that.
Indoor plants. We've actually lost one indoor plant and one outdoor plant on this 3-month-long house sit. And I have to say, it doesn't feel as bad as obviously losing a pet, but I feel pretty guilty about it.
Well, just buy them a plant for when you leave. Buy them an orchid when you leave as their farewell present. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Say, oh, sorry, I killed your plant. Here's an orchid.
I think the flower one inside was actually an annual or something, so it probably just died. That no matter what I did with it, it just died. So it's like the cleaner went, It's like,
and you know, she's probably knowing that it's going to die, right?
Yeah. I just felt like it was a bit of an annual or something just last year.
Yeah.
But, anyway, there you go.
Well, you know, I think what's really key about this is to talk to your homeowners about how attached. We're in a house right now, a friend of mine, and he's a bachelor, and he has people in and out here all the time, and he's got some plants here, but nobody's ever asked him, is anybody watering them? What's the care? So I think it's just really important to communicate. And we did that with our next house sit coming up in Mexico. And they said, oh, the gardener takes care of everything. You don't touch anything. I was like, oh, that's nice.
I like that.
So.
All right. So I want to ask everybody, please let me know. And thank you for joining, Fiona. Do you love gardening and indoor plants? Are plants your thing? Susanna and Renee?
I love gardening.
Yeah.
I had orchids when I lived in Florida. They are not demanding, but you have to be careful. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
In California, I also had a garden, and now in Chile, I'm starting my first little vegetable garden.
Oh, nice.
That's cool.
So I like it. I like it a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I like gardening, but I'm kind of a lazy gardener. I like low effort kind of stuff. So.
Does that include like getting your hands dirty? Type like, do you like sort of potting and planting and?
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely part of it. But I'll go through long periods where I just ignore my garden. But then I do a lot of work up front, so that I don't have to do work later.
But in Alaska though, do you get like the whole shutdown for a number of months? Is that sort of how it works with weather?
Where I live in Southeast, so it rains as much as it snows in the wintertime.
Mm.
And I live on a boat, and I have a little gardening float. So it takes some closure at the end of the season to get the gardening float ready for the following spring. But I don't know.
You know, that's amazing.
I think I'm just getting this whole new appreciation. It's like the essence of life. I mean, and plants can show you that. And where I come from in Australia, which is pretty much very, very small difference in seasons. Like it's almost like no seasons because it doesn't change that much. So to start living a life where I experience seasons, and to see what plants do, you know, it's actually really educational to see how they almost go to sleep and hibernate and then come back to life. It's quite incredible.
I think when we did the season in Canada, right through winter, in Quebec, and it was really interesting to see everything come back to life. It was just like, oh my God, stuff is not actually dead underneath all that snow of minus 30 day after day after day for months on end. And it's like, here it is back again. I was like, wow, that is really amazing.
You know, yeah, I lived in the Middle East for almost 2 decades, and you know, we would have lots and lots of color and geraniums all through the winter. Like they'd be planted in October and then they'd go till maybe April, probably more like March. And so I was used to that kind of gardening. And then when we moved to Colorado, I was like, oh,
Colorado, definitely.
Very short season, number one. And things you plant in the ground and you might never hear or see from them again. So I use gardening as a metaphor for seasons of my life, because I agree with you, Jody, there's a lot to be learned from paying attention to the nature around you. And I think there's just so much to learn and to grow from by these different environments that we get to enjoy.
I know, it is amazing, isn't it?
That sparked me, because like I wrote in the email that, you know, even though I believe I do not have a green finger, a green thumb or anything, I really do get on well with succulents and cacti and what have you. So it's sort of like, okay, what is cactus, cacti, succulents about? They're kind of like resilient year round. It's like, okay, if that's my chosen spiritual plant, I'm kind of happy with that.
What do you want?
They're gorgeous. I mean, when you go to Mexico and see now how they're using them, I mean, it's like, it's like having a totem animal, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We'll take a totem.
Mine would be the prickly pear.
You what?
Mine would be the prickly pear cactus.
Talking of pear, like totally different pear, but we've actually got 3 pear trees in our little backyard here. We've been on this house for 3 months, and our naughty boy here, it's obviously the end of summer and heading into the autumn. He only gets fed once a day, and he's a big dog, and they definitely got him on a strict diet because they don't want him to get overweight, which I understand, but he's a food monger. He started jumping up and picking the pears off the tree just to eat them, and I'm like, oh God, no!
That's going to be delicious.
I'm like, well, and the other side is I've got to pick up his poo after that as well.
It's like great.
Yeah, he was jumping up and picking the pears off the tree. It was like, God, don't do this to me. But they've got strawberries here. She's got 2 beautiful pots of oregano or oregano, however you say it. Lots of sort of, you know, herbs and plants and stuff. And what I also realized with getting to house sit in different places that have herb gardens and veggie gardens, and having never had that experience, I almost even didn't know what to do with fresh herbs. You know, like the first time I ever used fresh basil, I was so freaking excited. And then we get to Greece and we've got literally rosemary coming out of our ears. And you just go and get those twigs and do that really fancy chef thing where you pull the twigs off and chuck it in with your roast potatoes and stick it in the oven. And it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. What an amazing way to live. And, you know, getting tomatoes, the fresh tomatoes off the tree was, and even if they're all like odd shaped and odd and funny.
It doesn't matter, they taste good.
Oh, they taste amazing.
They taste amazing, yeah.
Can I show you my garden right now?
Please.
Yeah.
Well, this is the front garden. It's kind of disappeared because...
Wow, that looks amazing. That's so cool.
Colorado gardening.
I love it.
So you will not find me planting or pruning or doing anything in this garden.
It's really funny. We've got a couple of big trees in the backyard that are obviously seasonal. They've dropped all their leaves. But right beside one of them, every night we see these little, solar fairy lights go on. And it wasn't until the other day, and we've been here almost 3 months, it wasn't until the other day that I was going around and raking up the leaves, and I looked and I went, it's a little miniature pine tree. They've got the fairy lights around it as their little tiny Christmas tree here in the backyard, and I didn't even recognize it before. It's really funny.
Yeah. Sweet. Very sweet.
It is funny gardening around the world, though. Sorry. Knowing what plants are what, like what's weeds and what's plants. That's the hardest thing, because there's stuff you've never seen before, and all of a sudden it's like, am I supposed to be doing this, or am I supposed to stay?
Right.
A lot of the time I just leave it there because it's like, I don't know what this is now.
We had the house sit from hell this summer, and it's really the only very bad experience we've had. And one of the parts of it was that there was 75 potted plants that all got watered. This was in Spain, in the height of summer, and they all had to get hand watered every day.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one.
Yeah. Been there, done that?
I lived in Spain for 20 years.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you were talking about lawn mowing, and that's something that I just have no experience of whatsoever. When I lived in England, my husband did it all. And obviously in Spain, no lawn. At least we had a plastic one. But yeah, watering, I'm very used to the watering. But yes, getting all the lovely fruit and vegetables and herbs, yeah, that is quite normal. Houseplants I'm not so used to, because they were all outside, but then in the heat of Spain it's a bit similar to houseplants. So
I do want to talk about the houseplants for a second, because just, I guess, being totally unexperienced in the whole sort of indoor plant world, we've got an abundance of indoor plants in this particular place, but there's a really big one that even though it has a tray in its pot, there's the flooring that they've chosen. If any drops of water land on it, it's a natural fiber and it just stains instantly. So Nat picks up the big pot and she takes it up into the bathtub, puts it in the bathtub, waters it in there, lets it do its thing, and then picks it up and puts it back down where it is. And I've also seen her do that a lot with indoor plants, where it's just easier, whether there's, say, no tray on it or whatever, but putting it into the kitchen sink or the laundry tub and doing all the watering, and kind of like you have this little, miniature nursery where you can, like, do all your kind of make the plants feel all good, and they all get to talk to each other, and then you go and put them back into their little space. And
sometimes you need to soak the plants too, like they don't actually pour the water on them, they just need to soak. So
absolutely. I mean, there's an awful lot of plants that the roots need to semi-dry out, and then you need to soak them. Yeah. And then you let them semi-dry out again.
Well, one
baths and sinks are very good for that.
Yeah. One thing that I did get a message from a friend who talked about, there's an app, and I think I did put it into the Inner Circle group, but I'll make sure I put this out with the replay email. An app that identifies plants, and I think this is really important for international house sitters. So for international house sitters, we're coming across different plants that we maybe have never dealt with before. They're regional and seasonal and all those kind of things. So especially on a longer house sit, I mean, yes, the homeowner is going to tell you this, that, and the other of what they want done, but sometimes it's a case of like, well, if something doesn't go right, like, can I at least, snap this and see what it is and what the best care of it is?
I had that in France.
There's several apps. My favorite one it's called Plant Snap, and you take a picture of it, and then it tells you it identifies it if it can, and you can get all kinds of information about it. So
that's good.
I think mine is called Picture This. I'll go get my phone.
Okay. There were one thing that I didn't do. I didn't get the app, but when we got here, the homeowner showed us this amazing plant they have inside that has those really ornate, almost like China-like flowers. They're porcelain flowers. They're seasonal, so they've all gone now, but it's like a vine that has these little tiny porcelain type flowers on there.
Are they like waxy flowers?
Yeah, they're quite waxy.
Yeah, very small.
Long stem, sort of tiny little bulb on the top.
Huh.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Really pretty. It's the sort of thing that you would like literally pick off and decorate a cake with. You know, they were just so ornate and tiny and just amazing. But I should have probably got the app just to see exactly what it is and how to look after it, because I mean they're all gone now, but they were amazing.
This one's free. It's called Picture This, and it says, understand the weeds in your garden. What are they and how to control them?
I need that.
So that's a good one, because I took pictures in France. I took pictures of some things because I wanted to do, I do ikebana, and I wanted to make a nice arrangement for her, but I didn't want to cut anything that was really precious. So yeah, it's the same one. So I did that, and they told me what I was cutting.
That's really cool. So yeah, Plant Snap is the one that you've got, Renee? Plant Snap or Plant Snap? Plant Snap.
Plant Snap. Picture This. Yeah.
And picture this. Okay.
Oh, that's good. Picture This. Cool.
That's going to be helpful. We had a plant in France way back when we first started house sitting, and we were there for 4 months. But it was one of those ficus trees, but I didn't realize at the time what it was, and it started losing its leaves. And this was a really high-end property that we were looking after, and I was like totally freaked out. I was like, oh my God, don't die. Like, this is quite a big sized indoor plant. And I was like, oh, flipping heck, like, why is it losing all these leaves? I don't know whether I'm supposed to water it more or less, or what's wrong with it?
Right.
And then trying to work out even what it is. So
yeah. Thank God for these apps now. This is a great addition.
Yeah,
to
thank God. It's really good.
Very cool. I mean, I don't know. There's literally so much. I honestly can't believe that in doing these huddles for so long that we've not even tapped into sort of one of the most major parts of house sitting outside of pet care.
Yeah.
You know, like we've obviously identified pet care is generally the first thing, and you know, we occasionally get house sits without pets, so home cleanliness and security. But the plants, like, you know, when it comes to plants, like, people get obsessive when they're a green thumb. And this particular house, like when I walked around, because I came here on my own, Nat came, you know, a week later, and I'm walking around looking at these plants going, holy crap, they're all perfect. Yeah. All of them are perfect. I thought when I arrived too, I was like, oh, flip. I've got my work cut out for me.
Yeah. He is real bullshit. That doggy's really bullshit.
He needs
he is so
attention
all the time.
A run out today.
So he's cute.
No, with regards to the plants, luckily, although I've had several house sits already that have been plants, one that was specifically, I was there for the plants, none of them have been particularly difficult plants.
Yes.
That's good.
You know, they've always been really straightforward. And I have not had to do anything with lawns, as I say. I'm not looking forward to any that aren't quite so straightforward, although as all my sits at the moment are out in the middle of nowhere, they're more likely to be easier things.
Yeah.
You know, because they're, you know, it's more sort of country type stuff, so they're generally easier plants. Anyway, I'm turning off again.
All right, man. So
I'm in the garage, so there's a lot of background noise.
That's okay. I think the final thing I'll do before we have to take this boy outside and throw his Kong around the backyard is probably for me lawn mowing. I deem it as almost a meditative experience, like that whole sort of, and getting the smell, especially when you it's not wet and soggy, but when you get like that smell of fresh grass, I actually really quite enjoy. Watering plants, we had an experience in Mexico where we had this huge big balcony, and it was just all these pots. I think one of you mentioned about lots and lots of potted plants, and there was all these pots, and you had to just go along, and then you would swap hoses because it would only reach to a certain point, then you have to get another hose to take the rest of it. You can really find a lot of sort of sense of being in the present moment when you get to water plants. And I think that's an enjoyment level when I take on somebody else's routine. It's like, okay, we water the plants every afternoon, and then it becomes almost something I look forward to, as opposed to it being a chore. It's kind of like, actually, I can stand here and water these plants and look out at the view, or just, you know, absorb and see what's changed in the plant, or so it becomes almost like a, you know, an awareness kind of consciousness moment in doing things like watering the plant or mowing the lawn, or
weeding can be good for it too.
You're trying to embed weeding into me, but I don't have confidence in weeding, so it's still just your confidence.
I just pull crap. I don't know. It's like weed.
I have done some weeding.
Guessing game most of the time.
I mean, Renee, when you talked about like getting your hands dirty doing the gardening thing, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm a princess when it comes to getting my hands dirty. I have to put gloves on. I do not like getting my hands and fingernails and crap.
I mean to put gloves on, but I usually, I don't often do it. But I recognize that it's a good thing to do.
I know too, but it's like I know that whole earthly experience of getting your hands into mud and dirt and like being apart with nature and all that is like super, super good for you. But I still have my little princess thing of like, I don't want to get dirty and wash my hands.
Yeah, I usually end up cutting my fingernails after.
Yeah, no, that's the only way to get rid of it, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Hearing you.
Oh dear. Well, thank you, ladies, for coming along. And Susanna, you need to show the weaving that you are creating.
Yeah, what are you doing there? Oh, right.
Nice.
I'm making a basket.
Wow.
Out of what?
Yeah.
Huge leaf from a plant.
Wow.
It's huge, bigger, taller than myself. It's called 𝗄𝗄𝗏, something the natives have done here in Chile forever. And I'm taking a class now. I'm so happy I'm learning it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Let me show you something else I did.
Well, I want to say, do you need to like do anything to it to kind of preserve it? Like what happens?
Super proud. This is
Wow. That looks
That's so
amazing.
cool.
I bet it smells amazing.
I want to take that class.
How cool is that?
It looks like fun, doesn't it?
it's something very natural. You really work with the plant.
But what do you do after it? Do you need to treat it or do anything to it?
You know, there are different ways to weave it. Like this one is one way, and this one is a different way.
Right.
You can
Yeah,
see the
I don't think you have to do anything to preserve it. I think that it just the Tlingits around here do a lot of weaving, and they, as far as I can tell, they don't do anything to it. It's just that it hardens in place.
Yeah, like I made placemats. I'm making placemats. You can even
See, Fiona?
That is so amazing. It's like I'm looking at a placemat here, but I dare say this has been a bought one. It's like a, you know, that.
That's a different technique. They make a braid first, and then they stitch it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see the stitching.
You
Yeah,
can see
you can see the stitching.
Oh,
That is so cool.
that's awesome.
So what is this kind of weaving called?
I don't know. It doesn't have a name. The plant has a name called 𝗄𝗏𝗏. 𝗄𝗏𝗏 weaving.
𝗄𝗏𝗏 weaving.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's like long reeds of the. That's what your
𝗄𝗏𝗏.
A plant that has huge leaves. They are taller than me. And then you, like, this is a tiny bit that I have left over. So then what you do is with the needle, you pull them apart.
Yeah.
Like the thread.
Oh. Where do you get them from? Do you buy them or do
I
you?
don't know. The country, yeah.
Yeah.
The countryside. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
People used to plant them a lot because before we had nylon, this is how you tied it, all the vegetables like that went to the market, like asparagus and whatever you needed to tie it up, you did it with this plant.
That's so cool.
That's
And
awesome.
people are doing this again, you know, people that don't want to use plastic are coming back to the old times.
Nice.
It's perfect,
That's
isn't it?
awesome. Yeah. Oh, okay.
How do you spell that?
Gnoccha,
Gnoccha.
gnoccha is the N with a little kind of hat on top.
Uh-huh.
O-C-H-A.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Gotcha.
That is very
But
cool.
yeah, I think I've seen this plant in California, but I don't, you know, I didn't pay attention then.
Mm.
It must be a plant that grows all over the place.
One thing that I want to finish this off with was just probably more of a, I don't know, philosophical kind of aspect. I heard recently on a podcast that even though trees, as amazing as trees are, when it comes to, say, natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever, big, amazing, like oak trees and very well-rooted trees, whatever, can literally just fall over. Like they can be knocked off their stable ground and fall over. The most resilient tree in any kind of storm is actually a palm tree, and that's because it's flexible. And the flexibility of a palm tree, and I think that's what I was seeing, like even with that particular leaf, reminds me of some of the palm prongs as such, like when you get a palm prong that you can take the leaf off or whatever. But the flexibility of a palm tree to withstand a massive hurricane, tornado, cyclone, whatever it may be, and still be able to just move and bend and still stay rooted is actually phenomenal. And it just gives me a whole other insight into the energy of life, like the energy of what plants are. And even though I feel like I'm not a green thumb at all, I feel like I'm learning to appreciate and understand the life-giving force. I mean, at the end of the day, every single green thing that is out there is good for the inside of our body and it's good for the outside of our body. It creates oxygen, it creates love, it creates life. Yeah, so I'll end it with that, my little philosophical viewpoint on gardening and indoor plant care and life as a whole. And thank you so much for sharing your weaving, Susanna. That is just so phenomenal. I love it.
Sure.
Thanks for being here, Renee. Thank you for sharing, Doreen.
Yeah.
And great that Fiona dropped in as well. But
Alrighty, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys later.
see you next time.